Art restorers who have been studying the factors that cause Renaissance oil paintings to deteriorate physically. Okay, so this is just modifying factors. Factors that cause these paintings to deteriorate physically when subject to mean when these paintings are subject to climatic changes. Okay, so these are the factors that these art restorers have been studying. Which factors that cause these paintings to deteriorate when subject to climatic changes? These art restorers have found that the oil paint used in these paintings adjusts actually adjust to these changes well. Okay, so actually oil paint is not the culprit which leads to deterioration. They have found that this oil paint adjusts to climatic changes well. Okay, the art restorers therefore hypothesize. Okay, so on the basis of the last statement, what they have found, they are now hypothesizing that it is a layer of material called gesso, which is under the paint. So this gesso is under the paint. It is this layer of material that causes the deterioration. Okay, so they have found that oil paint is not causing the deterioration because it adjusts to climatic changes quite well, and therefore they are hypothesizing it is something else, which is gesso in this case. Okay. Of course, it's a very weak argument, right? We are just ruling out oil paint and then now suddenly we are jumping to gesso. It could be anything else in the painting, right? Okay, which of the following, if true, most strongly supports the restorer's hypothesis that it is actually gesso which is causing the deterioration? Okay. Option A, Renaissance oil paintings with a thin layer of gesso are less likely to show deterioration in response to climatic changes than those with a thicker layer. Okay, so thin layer of gesso, these paintings with the thin layer of gesso are less likely to show deterioration than paintings with a thicker layer of gesso. Okay, so the more the gesso, the more likely the painting is to show deterioration. Then gesso could be playing a role, right? It supports the hypothesis. It is not proving, and we are not looking for an option that proves the hypothesis, but it supports it increases the belief that yeah, if greater the amount of gesso, the more likely a painting is to show deterioration in response to climatic changes, then probably gesso is playing a role, right? So option A is the strengthener. Option B, Renaissance oil paintings are often painted on wooden panels which swell. Okay, these paintings are painted on wooden panels which swell when humidity increases and contract. So these wooden panels contract when humidity declines. So it means that wooden panels are really susceptible to deterioration, right? If essentially it is indicating that it could be the wooden panel that's causing the deterioration of the paintings, right? It actually weakens, it gives us an alternate cause, alternate reason why the paintings are deteriorating when subject to climatic changes. So it's giving us a other reason rather than guess so. Option C, oil paint expands and contracts readily in response to changes in temperature. So oil paint, it's saying, is actually expanding and contracting in response to changes in temperature, which means uh, it is responding to temperature. It's expanding and contracting, which means it's not really adjusting to the climatic changes well, but it absorbs little water. Okay, so is little affected by the changes in humidity. So it's not getting affected by humidity, but it's getting affected by temperature. So it is actually not supporting, not going against what they have found, right? What they have found is oil paint adjusts to climatic changes well, but it's saying, oh, it adapts to humidity well, but it does not really adapt to a temperature well because it expands and contracts readily. So it has unclear impact. on the argument. Okay, so this is out. Option D, an especially hard and non-absorbent, which doesn't absorb type of gesso was the raw material for moldings on the frames of these paintings. So we are using a particularly hard and non-absorbent, which is not going to absorb anything. If it's a hard and non-absorbent, it's not really going to absorb anything. It's particularly hard, probably it can then sustain changes, right? It can adjust to changes because it's not going to get impacted. It's especially hard and non-absorbent. This actually goes against the argument, right? That it is the gesso that is causing the deterioration. If this is the kind of material that gesso is, then probably it's not leading to deterioration. Option E. Gesso layers applied by Renaissance painters typically consisted of a coarse base layer, it's a coarse layer, onto which several increasingly fine grained layers were applied. Okay, so there is a coarse base layer onto which several increasingly fine grained layers were applied. That's fine, but I don't know what coarse base layer or fine grained layers have to do with adjusting to climatic changes. Okay, so this is no impact because doesn't matter whether it's a coarse base layer or a fine grained layer and then followed by increasingly coarse base layers, right? Because we don't have any relationship between how this is impacting the deterioration, how having a coarse base layer affects whether it adjusts to changes well or not. So this has no impact. So option A is the answer.